Marcus Hale had spent 10 years avoiding love. Then one rainy night in Chicago, he hit a black woman's bicycle with his luxury car. What should have been a brief apology turned into dinner. That dinner turned into obsession. And the woman who refused his money would become the one person powerful enough to destroy the life he had spent years rebuilding. Because Lena Brooks carried her own scars. And neither of them understood that some people enter your life quietly, only to change everything. Before we continue, if stories about love, second chances, and healing mean something to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps these stories reach people who need them the most. Now, let's continue. Rain hammered against the glass windows of Marcus Hale's penthouse while the city of Chicago glowed cold and silver beneath him. At 46 years old, Marcus had everything most men spent their lives chasing. Money. Influence. Luxury. Respect. But loneliness had become the most expensive thing he owned. The penthouse was silent except for the low jazz music playing near the fireplace. His suit jacket rested over a leather chair. An untouched glass of whiskey sat beside stacks of financial reports spread across the dining table. Marcus stared at the city without really seeing it. Another night. Another empty room. Another reminder that success could not speak back to you. His phone vibrated again. Darren. Marcus ignored it. 30 seconds later, the phone rang once more. With irritation, he finally answered. What? His younger brother sighed heavily. You missed the investor dinner. I know. You can't keep disappearing every time things get difficult. Marcus walked toward the window slowly. I'm handling it. That's exactly what worries me, Darren replied. You keep saying that while the company keeps bleeding money. Marcus's jaw tightened. For years, Hale Luxury Motors had dominated high-end automobile sales across Illinois. But the economy had changed. Online competition had exploded. Investors were nervous. Expansion costs were mounting faster than profits. And Marcus was exhausted. I said I'll handle it, he repeated coldly. Darren lowered his voice. You've been different lately. People change. No, Darren said quietly. People grieve. You never stopped. Silence filled the room. Marcus ended the call without another word. Because Darren was right. 10 years later, Marcus was still trapped inside one terrible winter night. The accident had happened in December. Snow covered the roads. Traffic moved slowly. Amelia had been laughing about something stupid he said at a charity gala. Marcus still remembered the exact sound of her laugh. Warm. Soft. Alive. Then headlights appeared across the ice too fast. A truck lost control. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. And suddenly everything disappeared. Marcus woke up 3 days later inside a hospital bed. Amelia never did. For months afterward, cameras followed him everywhere. Newspapers obsessed over the wealthy businessman who survived while his beautiful wife died beside him. Commentators analyzed photographs of the accident. Strangers debated his grief online like entertainment. Some blamed him for driving during the storm. Marcus blamed himself too. That guilt became permanent. People told him to move forward. His daughter begged him to heal. Therapists encouraged him to forgive himself. But Marcus secretly believed love was punishment now. If he loved someone deeply enough, eventually life would take them away. So he stopped trying. Women entered his life occasionally after Amelia's death. Elegant women. Successful women. Lonely women. But Marcus kept every relationship carefully controlled. No emotional promises. No vulnerability. No attachment. Just temporary companionship pretending to be intimacy. And eventually every woman realized the truth. Marcus Hale looked emotionally present. But part of him had died beside his wife. The following morning began like most others. At 5:30 a.m., Marcus woke automatically before sunrise. He exercised alone in the private gym overlooking Lake Michigan. Showered. Dressed in another tailored charcoal suit. Drank black coffee without tasting it. Routine had become survival. His assistant, Rebecca, handed him his schedule as soon as he entered the downtown office building. "You have a board meeting at 9, she said carefully. And Naomi called earlier." That made him pause. His daughter rarely called first anymore. Marcus loosened his tie slightly. "Did she leave a message?" Rebecca hesitated. "She asked if you're still coming to dinner Sunday." Guilt flickered through him instantly. He had missed the last 3 family dinners. Work excuses. Meetings. Travel. Anything easier than facing the quiet disappointment in Naomi's eyes. "I'll be there," he answered. Rebecca studied him gently before walking away. Even his employees could see it now. Marcus Hale was lonely. He simply wore expensive suits well enough to hide it. Across the city, Lena Brooks was ending a 12-hour overnight shift at the rehabilitation center. Her feet ached. Her lower back burned. And all she wanted was sleep. At 43 years old, Lena had mastered the art of functioning while exhausted. The rehabilitation center sat on Chicago's South Side, serving patients recovering from addiction, surgeries, injuries, and long-term illness. Most days were emotionally draining. Understaffed nurses carried impossible workloads while administrators obsessed over budgets instead of people. Still, Lena stayed. Because she understood broken people. Some patients arrived angry. Some ashamed. Some hopeless. Lena treated all of them with the same quiet dignity she wished someone had once shown her. As she prepared to leave, one of the younger nurses smiled tiredly. "You staying for overtime again tomorrow?" Lena laughed softly. "Unless somebody rich decides to pay my bills overnight." The younger nurse grinned. "You deserve somebody rich." Lena zipped her coat. "No," she said quietly. "I deserve peace." That answer carried years of pain behind it. Because love had nearly ruined Lena Brooks once already. 17 years earlier, Lena had fallen deeply in love with a man named Terrence Coleman. Terrence was charming, ambitious, magnetic. The kind of man who could walk into a room and make women feel chosen simply by looking at them. At first, life with him felt exciting. He spoke constantly about building businesses together, traveling together, raising a family together. Lena believed him completely. Then she became pregnant. And everything changed. Terrence slowly disappeared emotionally first. Then financially. Then physically. By the time Isaiah was born, Lena discovered Terrence had secretly opened credit accounts and loans under her name to cover gambling debts and failed business ventures. The betrayal nearly destroyed her credit, her stability, her trust. Terrence vanished before their son turned 1. Lena rebuilt her life alone. And she promised herself something afterward. Never depend on a man again. Especially not wealthy, charming men who spoke beautifully while destroying everything quietly. That evening, after another brutal day of meetings, Marcus drove himself home through heavy rain instead of using a driver. The city looked blurred beneath the storm. Traffic lights reflected against wet pavement. Wind rattled against windows. Thunder rolled somewhere across the lake. Marcus barely noticed. His mind remained trapped inside financial projections, investor pressure, and another ignored voicemail from Naomi. Then suddenly, thud. Marcus slammed the brakes violently. His heart nearly stopped. For one terrifying second, the accident came rushing back. Crashing metal. Fear. Loss. Breathing hard, Marcus stepped out into the rain. And saw her. A woman stood beside the road holding a damaged bicycle, rain soaking through her dark coat. Water dripped from tight curls framing a furious face. Beautiful. But not delicate. There was strength in the way she stood there staring at him. Like life had already tried breaking her once and failed. Marcus immediately raised both hands. "Are you hurt?" I said, "I'm fine." Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the rain. Marcus glanced at the bent bicycle wheel. "I didn't see you." That tends to happen when rich men think roads belong to them. Normally, Marcus would have apologized, written a check, and left. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the anger in her eyes. Maybe the exhaustion in his own chest. Maybe the strange feeling that this woman somehow understood loneliness too. Marcus reached for his wallet. "Let me replace the bicycle." "I don't want your money. You need transportation." "I'll figure it out." Lightning flashed overhead. For a moment they simply stared at each other beneath the storm. Then Marcus heard himself say something reckless. "Then let me buy you dinner." The woman blinked slowly. "What?" "Dinner," Marcus repeated. "You clearly hate me already. Might as well explain why properly." To his surprise, she laughed. Not flirtatiously. Almost bitterly. "You rich men really think confidence solves everything. No, Marcus said quietly. Just loneliness. That answer changed the atmosphere instantly. The woman's expression softened for only a second. Just enough for Marcus to notice sadness hiding beneath her anger. "My name is Marcus," he said. She hesitated. Then finally answered. "Lena." And neither of them realized yet that this reckless moment in the rain was about to change both their lives forever. The diner smelled like coffee, fried onions, and old memories. Marcus almost laughed at himself the moment he walked inside. 10 years earlier, he would never have stepped into a place like this wearing a $12,000 watch and Italian leather shoes. His world had become private restaurants, luxury lounges, silent chauffeurs, and business dinners where nobody spoke honestly about anything. But somehow, following Lena Brooks into that tiny South Side diner felt easier than returning to his empty penthouse. Rainwater dripped from Lena's coat as she slid into the booth across from him. "You always invite strangers to dinner after hitting them with your car?" she asked dryly. Marcus loosened his tie slightly. "Only the terrifying ones. You should work on your flirting." "I wasn't flirting." Lena raised one eyebrow slowly. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something unusual. Not attraction. Not yet. Awareness. The kind that makes silence suddenly feel dangerous. A waitress approached with tired eyes and a coffee pot. "You two married?" she asked casually. Both answered immediately. "No." The waitress smirked knowingly and walked away. Lena shook her head. "People love assuming things." Marcus leaned back carefully. "Most people are uncomfortable with strangers sharing a table willingly. Maybe because strangers usually want something." That answer carried weight behind it. Marcus noticed immediately. "You always this suspicious? You always this arrogant?" A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. And surprisingly, Lena noticed. At first, the conversation stayed defensive. Lena openly mocked wealthy businessmen who donated money publicly while ignoring suffering privately. Marcus countered with stories about employees he had personally helped through medical emergencies and financial crises. "You're still describing charity," Lena replied. "What's wrong with helping people?" "Nothing," she said. "Unless helping people becomes a way to feel superior to them." Marcus studied her quietly. "You think that's who I am?" "I think men with money like controlling situations." "You say that like experience." For the first time, Lena looked away. Outside, rain hammered against the diner windows while jazz music played softly from an old speaker near the kitchen. Finally, she spoke. "My son's father used money like bait," she admitted. "Promises too." Marcus said nothing. Lena wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "He talked about building a future together while secretly putting debt in my name behind my back." Her laugh was humorless. "By the time I figured it out, I was pregnant and drowning financially." Marcus watched her carefully. Pain recognized pain. "You raised your son alone?" he asked. "Yes." "That couldn't have been easy." It wasn't supposed to be. Something about that answer hit Marcus harder than expected. Because he understood what it meant when life became survival instead of living. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Lena looked directly at him. "What about you?" Marcus stared at the table briefly. Normally he avoided discussing Amelia completely. Talking about her always made grief feel fresh again. But something about Lena's honesty pulled truth out of him before he could stop it. "My wife died 10 years ago." The atmosphere changed instantly. Lena's expression softened. Marcus continued quietly. "Car accident." "I'm sorry." "So am I." Those 3 words carried years of guilt inside them. Lena noticed immediately. "You blame yourself." Marcus gave a small bitter smile. "Is it that obvious?" "Yes." He looked toward the rain-covered windows. "She loved storms," he admitted softly. "That night I almost suggested staying home because the roads looked bad. But you didn't." "No." Marcus swallowed slowly. "And sometimes I still think one different decision could have saved her." Lena didn't offer fake comfort. Didn't say it wasn't his fault. Didn't tell him to move on. Instead, she asked quietly, "How long have you been punishing yourself for surviving?" Marcus froze. Nobody had ever phrased it that way before. And the terrifying part was, she was right. The waitress returned with food neither of them realized they had ordered. For the next hour, conversation slowly shifted. Not easy. Not romantic. Real. Marcus learned Lena worked overnight shifts because night pay helped cover Isaiah's private asthma medication. She admitted she sometimes slept only 4 hours between jobs. "You work 2 jobs?" Marcus asked. 3 technically." "That's insane." "That's adulthood." Marcus shook his head slightly. "You shouldn't have to live like that." Lena laughed softly. "See? There it is again." "What?" "The rich man reflex. Thinking every difficult thing should immediately be fixed." Marcus opened his mouth to argue. Then stopped. Because she wasn't entirely wrong. Money had taught him to solve problems quickly. But grief? Loneliness? Regret? Those things ignored wealth completely. And for the first time in years, Marcus sat across from someone who wasn't impressed by him. Strangely. It felt relieving. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi Hale sat at her apartment staring at her father's unread messages. Her roommate glanced up from the couch. "You okay?" Naomi sighed heavily. "My dad's disappearing again." "You mean emotionally or physically?" "Both." Naomi loved her father deeply. But after Amelia's death, Marcus changed into someone quieter. Harder. Emotionally distant in ways that hurt without sounding cruel. He still provided everything financially. Still remembered birthdays. Still called occasionally. But he stopped letting people close emotionally. Even her. Especially her. Sometimes Naomi wondered if her father avoided her because she reminded him too much of Amelia. Back at the diner, Lena checked her phone and frowned. Marcus noticed immediately. "Everything okay? My son's probably awake waiting for me." "What's his name?" "Isaiah." "How old?" 16. "Which means he thinks he's 30. Marcus smiled faintly. "I have a daughter like that." Lena looked genuinely surprised. "You have kids?" "One." "You don't seem like somebody's father." Marcus laughed quietly for the first time that night. "And what exactly does somebody's father look like?" "Less emotionally unavailable." That caught him off guard. Lena smirked slightly after realizing she'd said it aloud. But Marcus didn't seem offended. Just thoughtful. "You're observant," he admitted. "You're lonely," she corrected. Again, silence settled between them. Heavy. Honest. Dangerous. Because emotional intimacy rarely begins with attraction. It begins with recognition. And somewhere beneath their sarcasm and guarded walls, Marcus and Lena were beginning to recognize themselves inside each other's pain. When they finally stepped outside, the storm had softened into light rain. Marcus reached into his pocket and handed her a business card. "In case you need help replacing the bike." Lena looked at the card. Then at him. Then back at the card again. "Hale Luxury Motors," she read quietly. Recognition flashed across her face instantly. "You're that Marcus Hale?" Marcus already regretted giving her the card. "The billionaire dealership guy. I prefer businessmen. The newspapers used to cover your wife's accident constantly." His chest tightened immediately. Lena noticed the change in his expression and instantly regretted bringing it up. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Marcus nodded once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That was me." Lena stared at him differently now. Not impressed. Just cautious again. Because suddenly he wasn't merely a lonely man in a diner. He was powerful. Wealthy. Dangerous in ways rich men often were. She handed the card back. "I don't owe rich men favors." Marcus looked at her steadily. "Dinner wasn't a favor." "Maybe not to you." Before he could respond, Lena turned and walked toward the train station alone. Marcus stood there watching her disappear into the wet Chicago night. And something unfamiliar settled inside his chest. Disappointment. Not because she rejected him romantically. Because he realized he genuinely wanted to see her again. 3 days passed. Marcus buried himself in work again. Investor meetings became hostile. Financial pressure worsened. Darren pushed harder for restructuring. But unexpectedly, Marcus kept thinking about Lena. The way she spoke honestly. The way she challenged him without fear. The exhaustion hidden beneath her strength. He hated how much peace he felt sitting across from her in that diner. By Thursday evening, Marcus finally admitted something uncomfortable to himself. He missed a stranger. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. Marcus answered distractedly. Marcus Hale. Silence. Then Lena's voice. I need help. He sat upright immediately. What happened? My son got into a fight at school. Marcus listened carefully as Lena explained. Another student had mocked Isaiah repeatedly about not having a father. The argument escalated into violence. Now the other student's wealthy parents threatened legal action. Lena sounded furious. Embarrassed. Overwhelmed. Marcus didn't hesitate. Give me the school's name. You don't have to. I know attorneys, he interrupted calmly. Good ones. Silence followed. Lena exhaled shakily. I hate asking for help. Marcus understood that feeling more than she realized. Yeah, he said quietly. Me too. The situation resolved faster than Lena expected. Marcus contacted a respected education attorney who quietly handled negotiations before charges escalated publicly. By Friday afternoon, the issue disappeared completely. No lawsuits. No police involvement. No permanent school record. Lena stared at her phone afterward, feeling conflicted. Relieved. Grateful. And irritated that Marcus Hale had once again entered her life carrying solutions she couldn't afford herself. That evening, Marcus received a text message. Thank you, Lena. He stared at the message longer than necessary. Then replied. You and Isaiah okay? Several minutes passed before her response appeared. We will be. Marcus smiled faintly. And for the first time in years, something inside him began waking up. Not love. Not yet. But possibility. Do you think someone can completely change your first impression over time? Tell me in the comments, have you ever met someone you misunderstood at first, only to realize later they became important to your life? After helping Isaiah with the school incident, Marcus expected Lena to disappear again. Instead, she called him 3 nights later. Not for help. Not for money. Just to say Isaiah wanted to thank him personally. Marcus found himself driving across Chicago after work with something unfamiliar sitting inside his chest. Anticipation. The South Side neighborhood looked nothing like the polished luxury districts he spent most of his life inside. Streetlights flickered above cracked sidewalks. Small family-owned stores sat beside aging apartment buildings. People still sat on porches talking despite the cold weather. It felt real. Messy. Lived in. Human. Marcus parked carefully outside Lena's apartment building carrying a small paper bag from a local bakery. When Lena opened the door, she immediately frowned. What's that? Dessert. You brought gifts? It's pie. That's how manipulation starts. Marcus laughed quietly. You accuse everybody of manipulation? Only men wearing $600 coats. It's cashmere. That doesn't help your case. For the first time since Amelia's death, Marcus genuinely smiled. And Lena noticed. The expression transformed him completely. Without the constant tension in his face, he suddenly looked younger. Softer. Less intimidating. More dangerous emotionally. Because warmth was harder to resist than charm. Isaiah turned out to be taller than Marcus expected. At 16, he carried himself with the awkward pride of a teenager trying desperately to become a man too quickly. Protective eyes studied Marcus carefully from beneath a hooded sweatshirt. "You the rich dude?" Isaiah asked immediately. "Isaiah," Lena warned. Marcus chuckled. "Fair question." Isaiah crossed his arms. "Mom says rich people usually want something." Marcus glanced toward Lena. "She's smart." "She's paranoid," Isaiah corrected. Lena rolled her eyes while Marcus laughed again. The sound surprised even him. Because it had been a long time since laughter came naturally. Dinner that night was simple. Take-out containers. Cheap wine. Basketball playing softly on television. Yet somehow, Marcus felt more comfortable sitting inside Lena's tiny apartment than he had inside his own penthouse for years. He watched Lena move through the kitchen while arguing with Isaiah about homework deadlines. Watched the exhaustion hidden beneath her strength. Watched the patience she somehow maintained despite working impossible hours. And quietly, Marcus began admiring her. Not because she needed saving. Because she kept surviving without becoming bitter. That kind of strength moved him deeply. At one point, Isaiah disappeared into his bedroom, leaving Marcus and Lena alone in the kitchen. "You don't belong here," Lena said softly while washing dishes. Marcus leaned against the counter. "That's not exactly welcoming." "You know what I mean." He did. Luxury businessmen rarely spent evenings in small South Side apartments discussing school suspensions over takeout food. Marcus looked around slowly. "You know," he admitted quietly, "this is the first normal dinner I've had in years." Lena stopped washing dishes. "Normal?" "No investors. No pretending. No networking." He looked directly at her. "Just people talking honestly." Something vulnerable flickered briefly across Lena's face. Then disappeared again. Honesty usually scares people. Maybe I'm tired of being scared. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Dangerously. Lena looked away first. Over the following weeks, their connection deepened slowly. Not through dramatic romance. Through consistency. Marcus started visiting the rehabilitation center under the excuse of discussing transportation donations for recovering patients. Officially, Hale Luxury Motors was expanding community outreach programs. Unofficially, Marcus simply wanted reasons to see Lena. At first, she accused him openly. "You don't have to invent charity projects to visit me." Marcus adjusted his suit calmly. "You think very highly of yourself. You keep showing up. You keep noticing." Their chemistry lived inside conversations like that. Sharp. Playful. Careful. But underneath the tension, trust slowly began forming. Marcus became unexpectedly popular among the rehabilitation patients too. Not because of his money. Because he listened. One elderly patient recovering from surgery spent nearly an hour telling Marcus stories about serving in Vietnam. Another recovering addict spoke openly with him about losing his marriage after years of substance abuse. Marcus listened to all of them carefully. Lena watched this quietly from the hallway one afternoon. "You're different here," she admitted later. Marcus looked up from paperwork. "Different how?" "Less guarded." He considered that. Maybe she was right. Around Lena's world, Marcus stopped feeling like a performance. No luxury expectations. No public image. No pretending success solved loneliness. For the first time in years, he simply felt like a man. Not a brand. But emotional closeness terrified Lena more with every passing day. Because Marcus wasn't behaving the way wealthy men usually did. He never pressured her. Never flaunted money around Isaiah. Never treated her struggles like charity projects. Instead, he remembered small things. How she liked too much cinnamon in coffee. How she rubbed her temples when stressed. How exhaustion made her emotionally quiet instead of angry. That level of attention frightened her. One evening after work, Lena sat inside Carla's apartment venting while her best friend poured wine. "You like him," Carla said immediately. "I tolerate him. You smile differently when you talk about him." Lena groaned. "He's rich, emotionally damaged, and stubborn. So are you." "That's not the point." Carla sat beside her carefully. "You're scared because he matters now." Lena stared silently into her wine glass. "Because unfortunately." Carla was right. Meanwhile, Marcus faced growing pressure from his own world. At a private investor dinner downtown, one business partner smirked while reviewing financial reports. "So," the man said casually, "I hear you've been spending time on the South Side lately." Marcus didn't look up. "And?" Another investor laughed quietly. "Interesting choice of company." Marcus's expression hardened instantly. "Be careful what you imply." The room fell silent. But the damage lingered afterward. Rumors spread quickly among wealthy social circles. People whispered about Marcus spending time with a black nurse from a struggling neighborhood. Some framed it as a midlife crisis. Others assumed Lena was pursuing his money. Marcus ignored most of it publicly. Privately, anger built steadily. Because for the first time in years, someone mattered enough to hurt him emotionally again. The tension worsened when Naomi finally met Lena unexpectedly. Marcus had invited Naomi to lunch downtown hoping to reconnect after months of distance. But halfway through the meal, Lena arrived at the restaurant carrying documents Marcus needed for the rehabilitation center project. The moment Naomi saw Lena, surprise flashed across her face. Not judgment. Curiosity. Later that evening, Naomi called him. "You like her?" Marcus stared out across the city skyline silently. "She's complicated." "So are you." "It's not that simple." Naomi's voice softened. "When Mom died, you stopped living emotionally. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. I survived. No, Naomi whispered. You disappeared. Those words haunted him long after the call ended. Because deep down, Marcus knew she was right. A week later came the moment everything shifted emotionally. Lena finished a brutal overnight shift during a snowstorm. By morning, public transportation delays trapped dozens of workers across the city. Marcus arrived unexpectedly outside the rehabilitation center in a black SUV. Lena frowned immediately after climbing inside. You tracking me now? You sounded exhausted on the phone. I was venting. Not requesting rescue. Marcus started driving slowly through snow-covered streets. You know, he said quietly, you're allowed to let people help you sometimes. Lena stared out the window. That's dangerous. Why? Because eventually people leave. Marcus's hands tightened slightly around the steering wheel. He understood that fear intimately. After several moments of silence, he spoke carefully. My wife used to say loneliness becomes addictive after enough pain. Lena turned toward him. She sounds wise. She was. For a second, grief passed visibly across Marcus's face. Raw. Unprotected. And instinctively, Lena touched his hand. The contact lasted barely 2 seconds. But it changed everything. Because suddenly the silence inside the vehicle no longer felt guarded. It felt intimate. Marcus looked down briefly at her hand before meeting her eyes again. Neither spoke. Neither moved away immediately. And for one terrifying moment, they both realized this connection was no longer friendship. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the way Lena touched his hand. The softness in her eyes. The dangerous comfort he felt around her. Across the city, Lena lay awake too. Because after years of emotional survival, she had finally made a mistake. She was falling in love. And love had consequences. The obstacle arrived sooner than either expected. 3 weeks later, Lena overheard 2 administrators arguing privately inside the rehabilitation center. Hale Industries finalized ownership months ago, one whispered. Lena froze instantly. Ownership? Confused, she quietly searched financial records later that afternoon. And her stomach dropped. Marcus's company had secretly purchased the rehabilitation center nearly 6 months earlier. Before he ever met her. Before the diner. Before Isaiah. Before everything. Suddenly every interaction felt suspicious. The donations. The visits. The interest in her life. Her chest tightened painfully. By evening, rage overwhelmed confusion. Marcus arrived at the rehabilitation center expecting dinner plans. Instead, Lena confronted him inside his office. You own this place? Marcus froze. The silence answered her immediately. Lena stepped backward slowly like she no longer recognized him. You knew this entire time? Marcus stood carefully. Lena. You bought the building where I work. It wasn't like that. Then explain it. Marcus ran one hand across his face, already realizing how terrible this looked. The acquisition happened before I met you. But you never told me. I was going to. When? His silence hurt more than words. Lena laughed bitterly. Oh my God. Lena, listen to me. No, she snapped. You listen. Pain filled her voice now. Real pain. You let me believe everything between us was honest while you quietly owned the place I depended on financially. Marcus stepped closer desperately. I didn't want you thinking I was trying to control your life. That's exactly what rich men do. That's not fair. No, Lena whispered emotionally. What's not fair is realizing I actually trusted you. The words hit Marcus hard enough to physically hurt. Because for the first time in years, someone's opinion truly mattered to him. And he was losing her. Would you risk opening your heart again after being deeply hurt? Or does pain eventually teach people to stop trusting love completely? Tell me honestly in the comments. Marcus stood motionless inside the rehabilitation center office long after Lena walked away. The silence felt unbearable. Outside the glass windows, snow drifted slowly across Chicago streets while nurses moved through hallways carrying charts and medication trays like life had not just shattered quietly between two people. But for Marcus, everything had changed. Again. Because losing Lena did not feel like the ending of a romance. It felt like grief returning in a different form. For the next several days, Lena ignored every message. Every call. Every voicemail. Marcus tried explaining repeatedly. The acquisition had been finalized months before they met. He never directly supervised her. He never intended to manipulate her life. But none of that mattered now. Because emotionally, Lena felt deceived. And the worst part was that Marcus understood why. Meanwhile, Lena threw herself into work harder than ever. Double shifts. Extra patience. Longer hours. Anything to avoid thinking about him. But avoiding Marcus emotionally became impossible because traces of him existed everywhere now. The new transportation vans outside the center. The upgraded patient equipment. The repaired recovery wing Marcus quietly financed after storm damage. Everywhere she looked, she saw reminders of a man she wanted desperately to hate. And couldn't. That contradiction exhausted her. One night after work, Carla cornered her inside the apartment kitchen. You love him. Lena continued unpacking groceries aggressively. No. Yes, you do. He lied. He withheld information. That's still lying. Carla sighed. Did he ever threaten your job? No. Did he ever treat you like an employee? No. Did he ever make you feel small? Lena stopped moving. Because despite everything, Marcus never had. Not once. Across the city, Marcus spiraled quietly. The investor situation worsened. Expansion deals collapsed. Financial articles speculated publicly about instability inside Hale Luxury Motors. Normally Marcus handled pressure ruthlessly. But heartbreak made concentration impossible. For years, work had numbed grief. Now even work stopped helping. One evening Darren finally confronted him inside his office. "You're falling apart." Marcus stared blankly at financial reports spread across his desk. "I'm fine. You haven't slept properly in weeks." "I said I'm fine." Darren slammed a folder onto the desk angrily. "No. You're miserable." Marcus finally looked up sharply. "You think I don't recognize this version of you?" Darren asked. "It's the same look you had after Amelia died. That name still hurt. Every time." Darren's voice softened slightly. "She mattered to you." Marcus laughed bitterly. "That obvious? You came back to life around her." The words hit harder than Marcus expected. Because maybe that was true. At the same time, Naomi watched her father unravel with growing concern. She visited the penthouse unexpectedly one Sunday afternoon and immediately noticed the difference. Unshaven face. Untouched food. Sleepless eyes. The apartment looked emotionally abandoned again. "You stopped trying," Naomi said quietly. Marcus poured coffee without answering. "She left because of the rehab center?" "Yes." Naomi leaned against the counter carefully. "Did you intentionally manipulate her?" "No." "Did you love her?" Marcus froze completely. Love. The word itself terrified him. Because loving Lena meant risking loss again. Eventually he answered honestly. "I think I do." Naomi smiled sadly. "Then stop hiding behind guilt." Marcus looked away immediately. "You don't understand." "No," Naomi whispered emotionally. "You don't understand." Her eyes filled slightly. "Mom loved you. She wouldn't want you punishing yourself forever because she died." Marcus swallowed hard. For years, nobody had spoken Amelia's memory aloud with that kind of honesty. Most people avoided discussing her entirely. But Naomi continued softly. "You act like loving another woman betrays Mom somehow." The silence in the penthouse became painfully heavy. Then Naomi finally asked the question Marcus avoided for 10 years. "Dad, how long are you going to survive instead of live?" Meanwhile, Lena's emotional walls began cracking too. Because despite her anger, she missed him. She missed his quiet presence in hospital hallways. Missed their arguments. Missed the strange calm she felt sitting beside him after exhausting shifts. Worst of all, Isaiah missed him too. One evening while Lena cooked dinner, Isaiah finally spoke carefully. "You know he actually cared about you, right?" Lena kept stirring pasta without looking up. "You're 16. Stay out of adult business." He showed up. That made her pause. Isaiah leaned against the kitchen doorway. Most people leave when things get complicated. He didn't. Lena stared silently at the stove. Because her son was right too. Marcus never disappeared during difficult moments. If anything, he moved closer. And that frightened her more than betrayal itself. Then came the night everything changed again. At nearly midnight, Lena woke suddenly to Isaiah struggling to breathe inside his bedroom. Panic exploded instantly. Isaiah suffered severe asthma attacks occasionally, but this one was worse. Much worse. His inhaler barely helped. Within minutes, Lena rushed him toward the emergency room through freezing rain while terror consumed her completely. At the hospital, things became even more chaotic. Insurance authorization issues delayed treatment approval. Staff shortages slowed intake. Isaiah's breathing worsened rapidly. Lena felt herself breaking emotionally. "Please," she begged the receptionist desperately. "My son can't breathe." But bureaucracy moved slower than fear. Then suddenly, "Lena." She turned sharply. Marcus stood behind her wearing a dark overcoat, snow melting across his shoulders. Relief hit her so hard it nearly hurt. "How did you?" "Carla called me." Marcus immediately took control calmly. No arrogance. No performance. Just action. He contacted specialists personally. Handled the insurance authorization within minutes. Spoke firmly with administrators until Isaiah received treatment immediately. And through all of it, Marcus never once acted like Lena owed him anything. Hours later, after Isaiah finally stabilized, exhaustion crashed over Lena completely. She sat silently beside the hospital bed while monitors beeped softly in the darkness. Marcus remained nearby without speaking. Present. Steady. Safe. Finally Lena whispered, "You came." Marcus looked at her carefully. "Of course I did." The simplicity of that answer shattered something inside her. Because she realized then, Marcus never loved her conditionally. Not through wealth. Not through control. Not through obligation. He simply loved her. Slowly. Imperfectly. Honestly. And after years of surviving disappointment. That kind of love felt terrifyingly rare. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Lena finally broke emotionally. Tears slipped quietly down her face as exhaustion, fear, loneliness, and heartbreak collapsed together all at once. "I'm so tired," she whispered shakily. Marcus moved beside her carefully. Not too close. Just enough. Lena covered her face briefly. "I spend my whole life trying not to need anybody because every time I depend on someone," her voice cracked. "Eventually they leave." Marcus looked at her with painful understanding. "I know." "No," she cried softly. "You don't." "Yes," he answered quietly. "I do." That silence afterward felt raw and exposed. Marcus stared down at his hands. "When Amelia died," he admitted softly, "part of me decided loving people was dangerous." Lena listened silently. "I thought if I stopped needing anyone emotionally," he continued, then maybe losing them wouldn't destroy me again. His voice lowered further. But then you happened. Lena closed her eyes briefly. Because hearing that hurt in the most beautiful way possible. Marcus looked directly at her. You made me want to live again. The words settled between them heavily. Real. Unpolished. Dangerous. And finally Lena understood something important. The real risk was never Marcus's wealth. It was how deeply he mattered to her now. That night changed both of them permanently. Not because all problems disappeared. They didn't. The financial gap still existed. Social judgment still existed. Fear still existed. But honesty finally existed too. And honesty changes relationships completely. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Lena slowly rebuilt what they almost destroyed. Not through dramatic apologies. Through consistency. Marcus stopped trying to solve every problem financially. Lena stopped pushing him away every time vulnerability appeared. They learned each other more deeply now. Marcus admitted he still replayed the accident some nights. Lena admitted she still checked bank accounts obsessively from old trauma. Neither tried fixing the other. They simply stayed. And for two people shaped by abandonment and grief, staying meant everything. One snowy evening, Marcus brought Lena to the lakefront after work. Chicago glowed beautifully beneath winter lights while cold wind moved across the water. Lena pulled her coat tighter. You know this is freezing, right? Marcus smiled faintly. You complain constantly. You like it. I do. For several moments they stood silently beside the lake. Then Marcus finally spoke carefully. I spent years thinking surviving was enough. Lena looked at him quietly. But surviving isn't living, he admitted. You taught me that. Emotion tightened in her chest instantly. Marcus turned toward her fully. And Lena. I don't want a temporary place in your life. The vulnerability in his voice nearly broke her heart. Because powerful men rarely sounded afraid. But Marcus did now. Afraid of losing her. Afraid of hoping again. Afraid of love itself. And somehow, that honesty made her trust him more. Slowly, Lena stepped closer. Then for the first time, she kissed him. Not dramatically. Not passionately. Soft. Careful. Healing. Like two wounded people finally allowing themselves peace. Snow fell quietly around them while Chicago moved endlessly in the background. And for the first time in over a decade, Marcus Hale no longer felt alone. Do you think love should always get a second chance? Or are some emotional wounds simply too deep to heal completely? Tell me what you honestly believe in the comments. Spring arrived slowly in Chicago. Snow disappeared from sidewalks. The lakefront thawed. And for the first time in years, Marcus Hale stopped waking up feeling emotionally empty. Not because life suddenly became perfect, but because loneliness no longer owned him. 6 months after Isaiah's hospitalization, things looked very different. Marcus had shocked investors by stepping away from several aggressive expansion projects at Hale Luxury Motors. Financial analysts called it irrational. Some business magazines described it as emotional decision-making. Maybe it was. But Marcus no longer cared about impressing people who disappeared the moment vulnerability appeared. For the first time in decades, he began building a life instead of merely maintaining an empire. And somehow, that life always seemed to lead back to Lena. One Saturday morning, Marcus stood inside a crowded grocery store holding 2 jars of pasta sauce while Lena laughed beside him. "You're seriously comparing labels? One has less sodium." "You own luxury dealerships," Lena replied. "Why are you acting like somebody's suburban husband?" Marcus smirked slightly. "Maybe I like the idea." Lena's expression softened instantly. Because moments like this mattered more than expensive gifts ever could. Ordinary moments. Peaceful moments. The kind neither of them believed they would experience again after 40. Isaiah adjusted surprisingly well to Marcus becoming part of their lives. At first, he remained cautious. Protective. Watching carefully for signs Marcus might eventually disappear like his father did. But Marcus never overpromised anything. He showed up consistently instead. Basketball games. Doctor appointments. Late-night college application essays. Slowly, trust formed naturally. One evening while working on scholarship applications together, Isaiah looked up from his laptop. "You know," he said awkwardly, "you don't really act rich." Marcus raised one eyebrow. "I'm not sure if that's an insult." "It's not." Isaiah shrugged. "Most rich people act like everybody owes them attention." Marcus leaned back thoughtfully. "My wife used to say character shows most clearly in how people treat those who can't benefit them." Isaiah nodded slowly. "She sounded smart." She was. The sadness in Marcus's voice still existed sometimes when he spoke about Amelia. But now, it no longer sounded like drowning. It sounded like memory. And there was a difference. Meanwhile, Lena experienced something unfamiliar too. Rest. Not physically. Life remained demanding. Bills still existed. Work remained exhausting. But emotionally, she stopped carrying everything alone. One night after work, Carla smiled knowingly while watching Lena pack leftovers inside the kitchen. "You look happier." Lena rolled her eyes immediately. "Don't start. You smile all the time now." "I do not." "You're literally smiling right now." Lena tried suppressing it. Failed. Carla laughed warmly. "That man healed something inside you." Lena became quiet after that. Because the truth was more complicated. Marcus didn't heal her by rescuing her. He healed her by staying honest long enough for her to feel safe lowering her armor. And after years of emotional survival, safety felt revolutionary. Marcus's relationship with Naomi improved too. One evening, father and daughter shared dinner together at the penthouse while the Chicago skyline glowed behind them. Naomi studied him carefully over her wine glass. "You're different." Marcus looked amused. "That obvious?" "Yes." He smiled faintly. "That woman saved your life emotionally," Naomi admitted softly. Marcus stared toward the city lights. "Maybe she reminded me I still had one." Naomi reached across the table and squeezed his hand gently. For years, grief had made their relationship feel distant. Careful. Fragile. But now Marcus listened more. Showed up more. Opened emotionally more. Loving Lena had not replaced Amelia's memory. It had simply taught him life could continue after devastation. And that realization changed everything. 3 months later, Marcus invited Lena to a charity gala downtown. The exact kind of wealthy event she usually hated. Lena stood in front of the mirror adjusting her black evening dress nervously. "I don't belong at places like this." Marcus stepped behind her slowly. "You belong anywhere you decide to stand." Their eyes met in the mirror. The sincerity in his voice still affected her every time. At the gala, wealthy guests whispered quietly when Lena entered beside Marcus. Some recognized her. Some judged silently. Some looked surprised that Marcus Hale seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. But something unexpected happened too. Marcus never left her side. Not possessively. Proudly. And for the first time, Lena realized he was no longer afraid of being seen loving her publicly. That mattered deeply. Because people willing to love you privately are common. People willing to stand beside you openly despite judgment. Those are rare. Later that evening, Marcus led Lena onto a quiet balcony overlooking downtown Chicago. Music drifted softly from inside the ballroom while city lights shimmered below them. "You okay?" he asked gently. Lena exhaled slowly. "I spent years believing love always came with humiliation eventually." Marcus moved closer carefully. "And now?" She looked up at him. "Now I think maybe love depends on who's holding it." Emotion passed visibly across Marcus's face. The wind moved softly around them while silence settled between their bodies comfortably. Then Marcus reached into his coat pocket. Lena immediately narrowed her eyes. "Oh no." Marcus laughed quietly. "That reaction is not encouraging. You're nervous." "I am." That alone shocked her. Marcus Hale negotiated million-dollar business deals without blinking. But right now, his hands trembled slightly. Slowly, he opened a small velvet box. Inside rested a simple, elegant ring. Nothing excessive. Nothing flashy. Beautiful without trying too hard. Exactly like the woman standing in front of him. Marcus looked directly into her eyes. "I spent 10 years surviving after losing Amelia," he said quietly. "Then one reckless night, I met a woman who refused my money, challenged my ego, and somehow made me want to live honestly again." Lena's eyes filled instantly. Marcus swallowed carefully. "You taught me love doesn't dishonor the people we lost." His voice softened further. It honors the fact we survived long enough to feel it again. A tear slipped down Lena's face. And finally Marcus asked softly, "Will you marry me?" For several seconds, Lena couldn't speak. Because this wasn't fairy tale love. It was harder than that. More mature. More frightening. More meaningful. This love understood grief. Understood betrayal. Understood loneliness. And still chose vulnerability anyway. Finally Lena laughed softly through tears. "You know," she whispered, "that reckless dinner invitation really did ruin my life." Marcus smiled nervously. "Good ruin or bad ruin?" Lena stepped closer slowly. Then kissed him before answering. "The kind worth risking everything for." And quietly, beneath the lights of Chicago, two people who once feared love more than loneliness finally chose each other completely. Not because life guaranteed forever, but because healing sometimes begins the moment we stop running from connection. Stories like this remind us that love doesn't end with heartbreak. Sometimes, it begins there. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful mature love stories filled with healing, passion, and second chances. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if love found you again when you least expected it? Thank you for watching. And don't miss the next story waiting for you.